What's going on, guys? This is Empty Box, and this is Copa Petrobras de Marcas, which is a fancy way of saying a free Reiza Studios touring car game. Therefore, you should probably download it because it's free and it's Reiza Studios. Which, if you're not familiar with Reiza Studios, then what is wrong with you? What is wrong with you, man? Game Stock Car Extreme is definitely one of the best sims out there on the market in terms of a complete package. And well, here's a free game that is quite similar to Game Stock Car, although not nearly as full-featured in many ways, which we'll go ahead and talk about. Given that this is free, I expect a lot of people who aren't necessarily familiar with these racing games, racing sims, whatever you want to call them, to take a look at this game. So therefore I'm going to go through a couple of different things I wouldn't normally do in a video, just so that way hopefully people kind of get a better experience out of the game. So anyways, first things first here. This is basically Game Stock Car, only with green instead of yellow. Yeah, and definitely much more awesome menu music. I mean, that's awesome music. That's all I'm going to say. That just says, let's race. So anyways, we're going to go over here to the profile page. We're going to go ahead and create a profile, because chances are you don't want to be the driver known as Petrobras. Maybe you do, but personally I don't. So we'll go into the options here really quick. I'm not going to go through everything. Feel free to go ahead and look through all these options. These are options that, well, if you're playing a PC game, yeah, they're options. If you're playing any game, they're options. But there's a fair few of them. Here's the main assist page that you'll probably end up using the most. But right up here at the top is the most critical, and that is the difficulty settings. We'll talk about this a little bit later on in the game, but AI strength is basically how fast your AI companions out there goes. The aggression is how much bumping and grinding they have, you know, versus themselves, versus you, the human player, I guess we'd say, as well as how willing they are to attempt a pass. If you turn it up to 100, you'll get, well, you'll get the full Brazilian, and I mean that in the racing sense, which means that, yeah, that's Dive Bomb City. But feel free to play around with that. These two settings in particular, the strength and aggression, will really affect how well the AI races with you. And this is something that's very critical that you kind of put a little time to figuring out, because it can be a little bit finicky, but sometimes when you get it right, it does come together quite nicely. There's definitely plenty of Game Stock Car videos on this channel to go ahead and showcase what happens when you do get the AI right. You get a fantastic race and a good challenge. Controls page, pretty standard fanfare. You know, you go through, you bind your controls. One thing to note is you might want to go ahead and change the speed sensitivity. I don't remember having to do this for Game Stock Car proper, but just keep that in mind. Yeah, and your head movement, obviously, which is controls how much the bumps and the G-force affects your view. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of that. I think I usually run 30 in Game Stock Car, which is personally my preferred way. If you want to go ahead and turn it up to 100, go ahead. It's worth doing at least once. Just a little bit of look ahead, which is basically your look to apex function. As you turn into the corner, your eyes in game will automatically kind of look towards the corner and compensate. So that's pretty much that. Set up your force feedback in the proper way. Personally, I've always used low effects with like 65-70% in Game Stock Car, which is what I've used here in this game as sort of my baseline. So that's what I'm going to be using here in this video. You can go ahead and see my force feedback settings, so you guys don't need to ask about that. Now, what is a little bit different coming from this Game Stock Car to this game is the fact that, unless I'm missing it, there is no way to change the degrees of rotation of the in-game steering wheel that you see in your car's cockpit. If you would like, you can go ahead and turn that off by turning the steering wheel off, or you can even turn it to fixed if you just like to remain there in the middle of the screen for you. But personally, I always run with that on when I'm recording videos. That way you can actually see my inputs and everything like that. But if I leave that on, that's going to be locked to a 270-degree steering lock by default, which I don't want to run a 270-degree steering wheel because, well, I have more than 270 degrees of steering capable of being input on my steering wheel. So let's go ahead and change that right now. So we've gone ahead and exited the game, and we're going to go ahead and change that visual steering wheel rotation angle right now. Something that's really easy, really quick to do. In fact, I can do it faster than I can explain it. So we're going to navigate to where we installed the game, which by default for this game is your local disk Marcas. And we're going to go into the user data folder. We're going to select the profile that we want to edit, which this is the default Petrobras file folder, profile, whatever you want to call it. We're going to use the one with my name on it because that's the one I'm going to be driving with. And then you're going to open up the controller.ini. This is just a simple text file. All you have to do is open it up with Notepad. You should be able to double click it. You might need to right click open with if it doesn't automatically open up with Notepad. But it's just a simple basic text file. You don't need anything fancy to edit it or anything like that. In the general controls section, which is going to be at the top, you're going to be looking for steering wheel range. This will default to 270, which basically means that, as you can read here on this line, if I can actually select it, steering wheel range equals 270 right now, degrees of rotation of in-game steering wheel. This has nothing to do with your actual physical steering wheel that you're controlling the car with. It's only what you see on screen to make sure that you get things matched up and everything looks all nice and pretty and everything like that. We're not going to be using 270 degrees. In fact, typically I use 900 degrees just because my wheel supports 900 degrees, and if I need it, I might as well go ahead and use it. But for this game in particular, I'm going to suggest 540 degrees. I'm going to set it to 540 degrees, and then if I had a Logitech or a Thrustmaster wheel, I'd go ahead and set the profile control panel for my wheel itself, my physical wheel, to match that setting. For example, if I wanted to run, let's say 340 degrees, I select 340, and then I'd go into my profile page for my steering wheel and select 340 degrees. With the Fanatec equipment, at least with the Club Sport wheel, it's a little bit differently because everything's stored on the wheel, so there's nothing for me to actually change here. It's just me changing the profile on the wheel. So that's that. Now we're going to go ahead and go back into the game. I'm going to set up all my controls and everything like that, and we'll rejoin you guys at the garage. Alright, I've gone ahead and fired up the game, and I've selected everything that I need to do. I've set up my controls. We're going to be doing a 15-minute race at Taruma, but before we actually get there, we have to change one setup option to reflect the fact that we have added degrees of rotation to the wheel, and that is to change the steering lock. And basically, all this is telling the game how far the front wheels can turn. The easiest way to think about this is backwards. For example, if I set my wheel to have 90 degrees of rotation, I could only turn my steering wheel 90 degrees one way or the other. It would be very sensitive because 100% steering is only 90 degrees. So basically I'd max out my steering lock very quickly. Whereas when I've upped the steering lock to 540 degrees or 900, for example, in other games, I need to have more steering lock to maintain a proper steering ratio. Otherwise, if I just leave this by default, my car is very unsensitive and I have to make very big inputs for anything to happen. Now, we've gone ahead and used 540 degrees, so we're just going to crank the steering lock up here in this game. 540 degrees, 22 degrees steering lock is a pretty safe setting, and it'll get you through. The car will drive decent enough. You might prefer to go ahead and remove a couple of degrees lock. You might find that you want to go ahead and take a little bit of degrees off of the wheel to make the steering a little bit more sensitive. But 540 and 22 degree steering lock is a pretty good baseline that I use. I've gone ahead and made a couple of small other setup adjustments. I've just changed the fuel level to make sure that we can complete the race. The brake bias, moved them a little bit more rearwards to make the car a little bit more unstable under braking, which I'll kind of explain why a little bit into the race. And I've changed the gear ratio, final drive ratio, just really quickly to suit this track. So that's all I've done. That's all you really need to do. And, well, I think it's finally race time. Alright, time for the moment of judgment. For you guys just rejoining us, we're doing a 15-minute race here at Taruma against a field of 17 AI cars. There's 18 total cars on the grid. We started in 13th position, I do believe. And the AI is set to 110% difficulty, 35% aggression, which, just for reference, in Game Stock Car Extreme, which is Reiza's flagship product, which we'll talk about in a little bit. That will be a main point of comparison. Settings like this for the AI result in me having to drive as fast as I can, push as hard as I can, pretty much drive exactly the same way I do in an online race, which is what is fantastic about GameStockCar, and why that title is my preferred sim for offline racing. But we'll come back to that in a moment. Anyways, this game is free. It's also by Reiza Studios, using the GameStockCar engine, which is the R Factor 1 engine. Yep, get your obligatory, oh, this is just an R Factor 1 mod comment out of the way. There you go. Okay. You can just go ahead and delete those comments. I don't want to read them. Nobody wants to read them. Everybody has heard that comment a million times now. So, you know, it's the same track from GameStockCar, same studio from GameStockCar. It is GameStockCar with front-wheel drive touring cars, no other additional content, no other, you know, cars to drive. As you know, really, GameStockCar has evolved into the point that it's no longer a game about Brazilian stock cars, but everything else. Oh, and Brazilian stock cars. You know, it's the same level of quality as GameStockCar, which GameStockCar is pretty dang good. Now, I'll say this. Mandatory GameStockCar promotion section every time I do a video from a Reiza Studios title. If you don't have GameStockCar and you like what you get with this title, buy GameStockCar. You won't regret it. Trust me. Just trust me. Just get it over with. You know you'll want it. But it is up to that same level of quality. In fact, when we saw this announced, I think a lot of us were expecting this to be add-on content to GameStockCar, which in many ways, I personally feel as a owner of GameStockCar would have been greatly superior. Because this is free, brought to you by Petrobras, I believe. It's basically a sponsored game, similar to what Simbin did with BMW M3 Challenge and Volvo the game, I believe. I think there was STCC as well, if memory serves me right. Is that an add-on for race? I can't even remember. It's been so long. Plus, there are front-wheel drive touring cars, which I'm not a huge fan of. But, hey, it is what it is. But, you know, it is to that same level of quality that this could easily be dropped into GameStockCar Extreme, which is a title that you pay for and you would not notice a difference. In this case, free does not mean, oh, it's free because it really actually sucks and they threw this together in 5 minutes. This really is up to the same exact standards that you would experience with a GameStockCar car. Now that said, let's get onto the physics a little bit. GameStockCar is on a dated engine. Copa de Marcas here is on a dated engine. It's the one and the same, basically. And because of that, there are newer titles out there with flashier physics engines in many ways, and more advanced physics engines, which often improves the driving feeling and the immersion factor and makes everything really a whole lot more fun. GameStockCar Extreme has a lot of cars that feel like they are still competitive and capable when comparing to more modern titles like Assetto Corsa, iRacing, and R Factor 2. That is alphabetical order for you people out there who like to tinfoil hat everything. But you know, the cars in that game tend to peck above the engine, you know, in terms of the sim racing pecking order. Whereas here I feel like these cars are running on a little bit older version of the same engine, or maybe they were developed a little while ago and they haven't necessarily made use of some of the things that Reiza Studios might have learned physics-wise. Or alternatively, perhaps easily explained, is the sense that this engine doesn't necessarily gel with cars like this as well as some of the other cars that you can make your comparisons to. And I think that is probably the easiest explained one, because basically in this engine, it is dated, it is old, there's less variables, there's less calculation, guess you could say, in a very simplified, basic, blocky term. And you know, you can tell everything is much stiffer, more solid. You know, for example, you know, R Factor 2 has, you know, tires that deform dynamically under load, chassis flex and everything like that, and you know, it helps to kind of take the sharpness away a little bit, if that makes any sense. But here, because these are front-wheel drive race cars, the rear of the car is basically skating around. It's there for stability, more or less. You know, the front wheels in a front-wheel drive race car are really overworked because they have to do all the power application, the majority of the braking, and of course all of the turning. So they want to have that rear end of the car able to rotate around. That's why typically you get a lot of lift-off oversteer, which is oversteer that's created by lifting off the throttle. Kind of like that, more or less, in a way. You know, which is a trait that is common to front-wheel drive race cars, which you can definitely tell here. However, I do feel like because it is a little bit more solid, perhaps overly so, I do find myself kind of feeling like it's a little bit exaggerated to what I would expect if I were to actually drive these cars at the same level, which obviously I don't, and I'd probably never get anywhere close. But you know, I do feel like that is a trait that's kind of a little bit overblown because of the engine, but I could be wrong. I do think it is within reason, and it's still very manageable. So it's still fun. I mean, a front-wheel drive car without lift-off oversteer is just terrible. So it's a good thing. Just gotta be careful with your right foot. Your right foot controls everything in these cars. Remember that, and you'll do moderately well. I say moderately because it's no guarantee, as I quite clearly have demonstrated. Or maybe I just suck with my right foot. Probably that one. But, you know, really the 3D models are up to snuff. The sounds are not appealing in the sense that these cars sound like crap, but I would expect a car of this type to sound like crap anyways. So I'm not saying it sounds like crap because the sounds are crap, but it's just kind of how the cars sound. They do a good enough job of providing immersion and detail and everything like that. However, I do also kind of feel like they're kind of out of place. Like there's no depth, no detail, no ambiance or anything like that. It kind of feels like I just feel like it's just like the engine sitting right next to me going beep. Which, you know, again, it's not necessarily, I would assume, the wrong sound entirely, but it just kind of doesn't feel like I'm in the track or at the track, you know, going around the track. It's just missing that space to it, I'd almost say. And I have seen a couple other people kind of mentioning the sounds and some issues with it or some things that they prefer, so I guess I'm not alone in that feeling. But, you know, again, it's not that big of a deal, especially when you consider that very few games actually have good sounding sounds anyways. So unfortunately, if you're a fan of racing games, racing sims, you just get used to sounds that aren't necessarily awesome, but still far from the worst. Again, another Reiza Studios trait. Not necessarily the best, but still far from the worst. And that's what makes them the best. Your mileage may vary, your opinion may change. But, you know, it is up to that standard, and that is something that really I want to continue to drive home. This game is good in spite of the fact it's free. It's not good because it is free, but because it is free and it's a good game, you should go ahead and download it if you haven't already. But there is one major gripe, and that is what I already alluded to. And this is really what kind of seals the deal, seals the fate of Copa de Marcas for me as a game that I probably won't play all that much. Not only does it have the fact that it's not in-game stock car, which is the same exact thing, only with the ability to add tracks and mods and everything like that, which is a whole lot better than just being stuck with these cars on these tracks, but licensing issues and agreements to make the game free in the first place are what they are, and that was Reiza Studios' decision. I almost guarantee you that you will see these cars in game stock car, either officially or unofficially, sooner rather than later. I mean, it's going to happen. But at least for now, you're just going to have to deal with it, unfortunately. But, really the big thing with game stock car, though, for me, is the AI. They're not necessarily the best AI ever. Again, typical Reiza Studios tradition. Not necessarily the best ever when they're absolutely amazing, but they're very good at not being garbage, which a lot of racing games have AI that is absolutely horrendous. I mean, absolutely horrendous. But, in game stock car, I can easily set the game up to the point where I get a very good, challenging race, which is what I want. I actually have to work for a pass, not like, for example, at the beginning of the race where I basically passed like 8 cars on the first lap or something crazy like that, where there's just like, oh hey, you guys are all going to break that early. I guess I'm just going to go ahead and take these positions because you're on the brakes 10 miles before the corner and I don't really have a choice. I'm sorry, I wasn't expecting you to brake like you're driving the Titanic. Okay, I thought you were driving a race car, but apparently I was wrong. And that really is the big thing. It just doesn't have that same feel. It doesn't excite me the same way. I don't feel nearly as drawn into the race or like I have to try as hard. Because again, when you do end up passing that many cars so easily, you just don't tend to care because you don't get the impression that they're actually trying, so you should too. And that's kind of the big thing. And some people will say, well, turn the difficulty up even further. It goes up to 120%. Very valid point. However, because of the way AI works in this game, in this engine, in most games, to be honest, the difficulty doesn't make them go faster in the corners. It makes them go faster down the straightaways, more or less. They generate their lap time entirely differently because they're driving entirely different physics, which is how things actually do work in these games, which some people apparently still don't know that, but yeah, that's how it works for the majority of titles. But, the further you turn up the difficulty, the more that becomes apparent. I can think of numerous times where I'll go through the corner much faster than the AI, I'll get off the corner better than the AI, and I'll be accelerating faster than them, and then all of a sudden, probably about 50 feet out of the corner, it's like they have VTEC kick in, and all of a sudden they're just gone. And I'm like, how am I supposed to compete with that? So I'm just going to outbrake you because you brake 50 miles early, even still. So it doesn't actually help. The AI still gets in the way. The big problem is they go slow in the corners, which is where that's the problem. You can go as fast as you want down the straightaway. You're not in my way on the straightaway. When I get to the middle of the corner and you turn in and you basically stop at the apex, that's the problem. Which they have a strong tendency to do in this game for one reason or another. I really am baffled, and that's part of the reason why this video kind of was, I guess you could say, taking so long. But I was hoping with the initial patch that they did to fix the stability issues and the installation issues that this game had originally, I was hoping that maybe there would be an update to the AI, because it just doesn't feel as good as game stock car. And again, it's free, and some people would let the game hide behind that, but I'm trying to think what the difference possibly could be, and would there be a valid reason for it's free? Because, I mean, the track already exists from game stock car. Do you have to pay for tweaks to to the configuration file? Is that what the difference is? Or is it just a case of the AI not necessarily driving the cars as well because of the way the cars drive and because of the way AI has to work, which is what I think it is. But honestly, it's really, really annoying how slow the AI is in this game. You know, which, again, some people might not necessarily be, all that put off by it. It is something that your mileage may vary, depending on your skill level, depending on how much experience you have with other sims or whatever, that can obviously skew your viewpoint. But, comparing even to Reiza Studios' other works, I just don't see how it got to this point where it is this problematic. Because again, I'm not even good in front-wheel drive touring cars, and I think my driving has really proven that. I've basically carried on a casual conversation, started from the back, finished 4th, against settings that in another title by the same studio, with cars I'm significantly better in, and I have to actually pay attention and concentrate, and give it my full attention. I struggled to finish in the top 10. I just, and again, it is really the problem that they just go so slow in the middle of the corner that you get the passes like I had, and as you saw, the race wasn't really all that exciting. It's just kind of driving around because, the cars in front of me were probably about the same speed, the cars behind me were way slower, so nothing happened, and that just isn't exciting. And that's the big thing versus GameStop car. Again, mandatory GameStop car promotion. I'm not paid by Reiza Studios or anything like that, not affiliated with them. I just happen to be a very, very big fan because they deserve it. I just don't feel like this is up to the same standards in that regard. And really, that's the glaring thing with this game versus its competition. I should say its bigger brother who can beat up your brother or whatever have you. It's kind of like that kid on the playground. This is GameStop Car Jr. And GameStop Car Jr. has a brother that can probably beat up your brother, which is what he likes to rub in your face because that's important to him. Sort of a comparison that people might not understand, but hopefully you do. But I mean, it's good, it's enjoyable, it's up to Reiza's standards in every area except for the AI, which kind of turns me off as somebody who does have GameStop car and enjoys it immensely, as well as the fact that, again, as a GameStop car owner, this isn't in GameStop car, which means I don't get the mods and everything that I already have in GameStop car. But if you don't have GameStop car, I think this is a very good way to introduce yourself to Reiza Studios and what they do quite well, and that is be very good in a lot of areas while at the same time being poor in very few, which is what really GameStop car is all about, and front-wheel drive, bro. Yes, I realize the race is over. I'm just kind of filling in the rest of the video and finishing things up. So that's that. It's worth a download, that's for sure. But yeah, I don't foresee myself playing it all that much. But again, it's definitely worth the download, especially if you don't have GameStop car, because hopefully this will convince you that you should buy GameStop car if I haven't already. My mission? Make everybody buy GameStop car, I guess. So, still, that's what this game is for, basically, to get you to buy GameStop car. This is what this video is for, to get you to buy GameStop car. Are you getting the picture? This is good, but you want GameStop car. Just trust me. Just trust me. Just get GameStop car. This should be your convincing that you need GameStop car. Yes, this was a video about a game not titled GameStop car that has devolved into, hey, yeah, here's a good reason you should get GameStop car. Because this is pretty good, but GameStop car is better. So, hope you guys enjoyed. Hope you guys are enjoying GameStop car. Aight, bye.